Hi, I'm Dan Milano again, and I am joined by some key players in the making of this episode, Rabbit Redux.
I'm Brent Carpenter. I directed this one and edited all of them.
Hi, I'm Bill Freiberger, and I wrote this episode.
And I'm James Murray, and I played Rochester.
Now, the original name of this episode was Rochester Returns, and when I wrote my first draft, I changed the name to Rabbit Redux, which is a reference to the John Updike series of novels. The second novel was Rabbit Redux, but nobody knew that when I handed it in.
Yes, and we all, to this day, I think until yesterday, I called it Rabbit Redo, because I just think it's French.
It's funny, when we were doing this, there was a time when we were breaking the story where we were actually considering making this a two-part episode, which
Yes.
happens a lot in comedy writing, where you have something you're so excited about. Hey, there's my name. You have something you're so excited about. You say, this would be a great two-parter, and it's never, ever a two-parter. I've seen it on dozens of shows that I've been on.
It's just overpassionate.
Overpassionate, and eventually it's back to being one part.
That's funny. Now, Bill, you wrote this song, right? And
I wrote this song. Actually, my wife wrote the music because I wrote the lyrics in my script. It's in every draft of the script, but no one ever bothered to get music written for it. And so I called my wife, who's a Juilliard-trained pianist, and I said, we need a song, we need a tune in about an hour. Can you write something? And she wrote the music.
It's great.
There's your name again.
Cool.
Hey,
There-
Brent,
there's
since we see your name, this is one of the few stylistic things we ever did.
Yeah, we got a little strange in this. It was supposed to be an Andrew Lloyd Webber musical gone dark, and I think we went a little darker.
I remember when we were going to do this, we had the song, and I said to Bob, we wrote this song. He said, hey, I've sung Sondheim. I can sing your stupid song.
This was a little tough because Greg has to give Seth a black eye, and for Seth to be close enough, they almost had to be making out. So a little logistic work
Uncomfortably
here.
close.
Apropos of that, in my first draft of this, when Greg is making all that noise in bed, Jimmy comes in because he thinks he's masturbating. I believe he says, hey, I know a bunny has his needs, but if you're going to do that, just be quiet about it.
That was added. That's what plays, and that was added when we reshot the scene. Originally, it was much more babyish. It was much more Jimmy, I had a nightmare, and that was creepy. So it got a little older.
Put something on that eye, Jimmy.
Come on, Greg, you're a little bunny.
And sometimes we did have Dan wasn't always in the hole with this stuff because he had to do so many things on this show. He was Greg and Warren and the executive producer.
That's right.
We would have a stunt Greg in there, and then Dan would do the voice later.
That's right. That was Victor Yerrid performing, and I did the voice later.
No. I'm talking about the donuts you were supposed to finish.
This is fun.
This one for a kidney.
Seth has joined us in the back of the room.
I'm just here for the snacks. Yeah, it's nothing. That's something I got playing rugby.
You play rugby.
This is good stuff.
Yeah, this is something that we had talked about on and off, was the relationship between Jimmy and Alison. And we were constantly toying with whether there was
Yes.
this attraction, whether there wasn't an attraction. And this was one of the episodes where there was an attraction.
We just I know that was kind of a division with the producers. We kind of we didn't really want to go with conventional relationships, and obviously that's something that's been done many times. And I think that sort of Sam and Diane thing didn't work for these humans. I know both the actors were confused by that relationship, and I think truer to the tone of the show would have been a puppet human obsession. I had always wanted Warren to be obsessed with Alison and for her to be disgusted by him, but of course every once in a while you'd open a broom closet and there they were.
Right.
Just this primal attraction.
See, there was one episode where we had Blah in bed with Mary Lou Henner.
Yes.
Yes.
And in this episode, we had this thing, which was a progression, with Susan the monster and Jimmy using Susan to make Alison jealous. But originally, Susan is in the pilot as just a monster who's auditioning. And then Jesser and Silverstein in their script made it a woman, which was really funny, even though it had that really deep voice
Right.
that I believe you did.
Yes,
James,
that's a James
me
character.
over here.
And then ultimately in this one, I had this little idea in my script that just a little flirtation between the two of them, where she's kind of horny for Jimmy, and then it became much more of the runner as the story evolved into making Alison jealous.
While you have the chance, maybe you could talk a little more too about that, the evolution of this episode, because it really did go through a lot.
It's really funny because I was reading over the script when I was preparing to come here, and I have to say it was a much darker script, and stuff coming up I'll talk about specifically how it was darker, and in the first two acts, I mean, just all about Rochester, who I thought was funny, and also this section here about recognizing that Rochester was the thing in his nightmare. I dragged it out a lot more, and I think it actually in this version is much, much more concise and leaner and makes more sense.
You thought Rochester was funny? That's good.
Rochester. Well, the benefit was that I think the episode got tighter and more efficiently written, which was true of many of our draft progressions.
Well, it was
but
pretty
also,
well edited.
And with yes, and it was very well edited, but lost edge, for lack of a better word. I can't believe I'm even using that word, but it got lightened up.
And also, they're going to see Rochester now. In my draft, it was Warren that takes him to see Rochester, which I thought was funnier
Right, to get
because
his money back.
Warren is such a degenerate and Rochester is such a degenerate. And we ended up making it Bob and the meatloaf pan only because we wanted to have some human interaction in the scene.
That's right. That's right.
I'll smell you later.
That's good stuff.
Bye, Susan.
Susan's got one Bob Dole arm right there.
That's weird.
Kept trying to make breasts for her too, which didn't quite work.
Now, this was my favorite part. We had to go outside and put a puppet in a yard so it looked like he was actually selling maps there. And as we were scouting locations, we saw a sewer hole in the grass. And I jokingly said, well, we could put James down in the sewer and put the lid on top of him. And all of a sudden, everybody believed it. And James?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much.
There he is.
It was a pleasure being in the sewer hole. Actually, it was really nice to come back as Rochester because in the pilot episode, being very excited as an actor to get a great character, only to find out that he gets fired in the first episode. A little depressing.
Dream and
so
nightmare.
I was very happy when Bill brought back Rachi for this episode, but then wasn't very pleased. There, see, that's about how I felt about Rochester dying in this episode.
And how much water came down in that hole after we got done?
All of it.
Well, here's a couple of interesting things about this scene. Originally, it was written where it was Warren and Greg, and they were in a car, and they were driving around, and they see the guy selling the star maps.
That's right.
And for budget reasons, we got rid of the car. Just
Oh,
had them
right. And they
walking.
were looking for Rochester's house. So
Yeah.
they're like, oh, let's get.
Yeah, they're driving
right.
around saying, where does he live? I don't remember where he lives. I was only
Let's
ever
get a
there when I
star
was
map,
drunk.
and
Let's
there
get
he
a
is.
star map, and there he is.
Right.
And also, this scene was longer because we wanted to keep humiliating Rochester. So he gets splashed like 3 times. And what we did was we ended up cutting it down to he only gets splashed twice. So from the first time to the second time, he gets wetter for no reason, if you look carefully. Look how wet he is now. It's because it was probably the third time.
I like the line. Maybe you want to move back about 5 feet.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Rochester. Greg, you brought Rochester.
This was fun to do. our
I always
rabbits
enjoyed
together.
when we were editing, Dan would come in. And if we needed to change a line for Eugene, Dan would just do Eugene's voice. He was very good at it. And one day Eugene came up and he did Greg for us, which was pretty amazing.
That's right.
And also, as I said before, how much darker this episode was when it was Warren who visits Rochester on the street there. And basically all he wants Rochester for is Rochester owes him $200. And Rochester says, hey, if I had that kind of money, I'd have bought a gun and put it in my mouth a long time ago.
Yeah, do you notice that Rachi has a melanoma on the side of his face there, which was reference to a line that was cut, I believe.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, from sitting out in the sun.
That's right.
selling star maps, he has a melanoma.
These aren't your father's puppets.
Yeah, that was, again, part of how dark this was. That, and later on we find out, although in this version I don't think it's in there, that Rochester was Dottie's first.
That's right.
Yes, that is in the deleted scenes.
And basically she had just moved to Hollywood. She's probably like 16, and she's living in a hotel with hookers on Sunset Boulevard. And Rochester meets her there, probably because he was visiting the hookers. And she paints this story about how nice he was, and he visited her every day, and he wanted to help her with her career. And all the subtext of that is he was a lecherous old man who was taking advantage of her.
Right.
And all of that is also gone.
I have to thank our puppet department for this rig with the mop, by the way,
Yeah,
which
that's
was just
big
wonderful.
difference between the Muppets is not only did you see the floor, but you had to cut a hole for Rochester and a separate hole for the mop, which went under the floor.
Right.
Somebody operated Rochester and somebody operated the mop.
You replaced him with Greg,
Somebody?
and you hired him back to
Did you do
James
both of those? You had to
operated
flip the
Rochester.
mop when he puts the mop away, which is coming up before he takes the stage. I remember that being an ordeal. Rachi having to put his mop back in the bucket.
Hey, Jimmy. Hi, Susan.
And it was nice to get outside.
She's so
And there's
feminine.
James, you were all over this episode.
Yes,
It's
I
Susan
was.
and
It was a
Rochester.
pleasure.
Well, Rochester was originally just a character for the pilot. It was just a means to bring Greg into the world of Sweetknuckle. And, we missed him and decided that it would be great to bring him back. And then, as you say, James, in the same breath, we said, all right, well, let's bring this character back, and now let's kill him.
Yeah, it's a funny story how that came about. My best friend from childhood had died of a heart attack
That
6
is
months
funny.
earlier.
That's funny.
And basically it gave me the idea for this and almost made it impossible to write. And I couldn't figure out what's my problem. Why am I having trouble writing this? Well, it's because it's hitting too close to home. But eventually we got it out.
And we should give props to Seth here because this entire scene he had to stare into the sun for. We had to shoot it so fast and turn it around so fast that he just had sunlight in his eyes the entire time and managed to get through it.
Fortunately, he had makeup to settle back on to explain the squinting.
Ooh, this is really difficult for me.
I'm just imagining how hot it was that day being in Susan.
Is that because of Sarah?
Please. What would he want with a hairless, two-breasted woman when he could have all this?
Look how that sweater is clinging to the arm because it's such a cheat.
There's a safety pin.
Yeah.
Rochester, look at you. You're back and you're better than ever.
Here's the mop trick.
Greg with crumbs all over himself. There you go.
Nice.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's the kind of stuff we care about, and none of you will. How good the mop looks.
Greg.
Coming up here is a great moment for me because I love to use turkey in the straw and things I write. I find it very funny, and also it's public domain. And
Where
it's
else
free.
have you used it?
I used it on 3 South, which is a show I ran, and I use it all the time. I just think it's a really funny song.
Brent, I have to point out, by the way, these great shots. Puppet point of view, wide shot of Greg, point of view angle swishing back and forth. This was so much more the flavor that we wanted to have in most of our shows, but couldn't.
Well, that really shows the difference between this and the Muppets because you saw the floor and Greg on the floor, and that meant you had a tiny little hole to put your hand through.
Right.
And you never see that stuff on any of the other shows.
As if I care. Rachi, you think you
Yes,
can do
Seth is reminding me to talk about that suit. I was excited that we got that turkey suit because it's actually the suit that Paul Simon sang in on Saturday Night Live, which I'm a huge fan of, or was in the 70s. And also great to have Bob. He was excited to do this.
Yeah, well, Bob had mentioned to me once that he played the banjo, so
Yeah.
I wrote it in.
It's great.
He played for real.
Now, talk about being a trooper. Let me just say that Dina had terrible bruises from this suit. They really hurt
got
her
pretty beat up.
shoulders, and she put up with a lot to do this gag.
Gee, look who's not limping anymore.
And James James had to work his butt off on this. What was Bill's comment as far as your dancing?
Oh, we have an outtake of
3 or
that.
4 of these. A little harder, a little faster, a little harder.
Yeah, you kept saying to do faster and faster
Yeah.
before the heart attack.
I wanted him to look like you earned that heart attack. Look at him there.
And this is green screen
is
of
all
the
green screen, yeah.
Rochester.
Movie magic.
Yeah, that's me
Rochester's
and Drew
not-
Massey. Drew Massey working
Yeah.
the old legs there.
They're not in that scene.
That looked so good.
$1 billion green screen. What I love is that's one of the best shots, and there's absolutely nothing to it other
Dead
than a
puppet.
doll. Just
I also wanted Junction Jack, who we talked about being.
What's everybody standing? What did Roger dance himself to death?
My favorite part.
Yeah,
Must say
that
I
was
love this.
that was Spencer's joke. I
yes,
remember.
Spencer Shinoy wrote this line.
Well, Junction Jack was like supposed to be a puppet racist, and I really wanted him to give the puppet CPR and really be into it because he had this army training, supposedly. I wanted to make use of the backstory.
To cheer you up.
Thanks, Jordy.
The longer version of this scene is on your DVD with the
That
Rochester
switch
was
worked really
my
well,
first.
by the way. Did you see that? She switched it about 10 minutes later. The light went on.
And I think that took 5 takes to get that far.
We were so exhausted from the puppet dancing that something had to give.
Yeah, it was tough.
You're from Iowa, all alone in a strange city.
She talks about how Rachi was the first here.
And now he's gone.
Yeah, this whole thing, and it was so seedy. The whole thing was so, she was this runaway who'd come to be in a TV show, and this old man was taking advantage of her, and it was supposed to be sweet and disgusting at the same time.
There are actually pictures of Dottie all over Greg's dressing room, which was a subtle thing that he was kind of obsessed with her.
Did we do that in an episode?
Yeah, the episode
Dottie
before
Heat,
this
yeah.
was Dottie Heat, I believe.
Yeah. Which had the brilliant spit take that Brad rigged up.
Yes, Coughing Greg, that's on the DVD as well.
This is where the show takes a complete departure from what we had planned and what I wrote in my first draft, in that I didn't have any of this crazy funeral stuff. And Rochester's brother Winchester showed up, who was going to replace Rochester on the show.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was completely cut out.
Matt and Dave picked out those girls for us. They
Yes,
were on
thank-
horse
thank them.
selection
This was a long day in shooting
because
this
of their
bar.
association with the Man Show.
And watch when later when there's a fire and they run away, how convincing they are.
Isn't that a friend of yours in the corner, Dan?
Yeah, my college roommate, that's his back there. That's Chris Burgosh, who appears in the Tardy movie on this disc.
Very often people hook up.
Big influence on this show, actually.
He was around for everything.
This is a great bit. Yeah, how long did we shoot in this bar? 2
An
days?
entire day,
It was a
at
whole
least.
day, yeah.
Till very early in the morning.
I don't know if people get she's fixing her breast.
Yeah, because we mentioned earlier that she has more than 2.
She's supposed to have 6.
Who are you kidding? You told everybody.
In graphic detail.
This was a good joke.
But I guess you get the last laugh because now he's the one laying there like a lox.
Like a lox. That's good.
One of my only disappointments, because Howard did such a great job with the music, this scene originally had a song called The Dying Crap Shooter's Blues, which is basically about a guy asking for this exact funeral. But we couldn't clear it.
No.
This is where it got really weird. I'm going to say something that I don't like about it. I thought it became too much like laughing. And then I'm going to follow that with a compliment to Barton Dean, who was one of the writers, and that he basically wrote all these jokes. He was just so good at writing these insult jokes. We'd be sitting there and he'd wing off another one.
Oh, that's
another
great.
one.
I thought you had brought in a book or something like that.
No, Barton came
roast.
up with a lot of these.
Oh, that's great.
Hey, we're burying the wrong guy.
Now, these extras you see with Dina back there, they weren't real good at laughing. And in order to get any reactions that were real in it, we managed to convince Sarah to do a bit of her stand-up act without them knowing it, so that the lines just kind of came out of nowhere, and I think most of them were pretty shocked by it. Dan?
Yeah, I think the joke was something about how you should give strippers the Purple Heart for waxing their assholes, which is right
there.
around
Those are the laughs
there.
from that. All of the laughs are from Sarah's stand-up material.
And Sarah's such a funny stand-up, and yet she got one of the lamest jokes for this. I guess Alison just didn't have the same reservoir of...
Yeah, it's a thin line trying to figure out what the people would actually be capable of. Hey, there's the dumpster that Dan crawled into in that other episode.
Yes, which
right,
was
yeah.
behind one of the seediest bars in town.
Yeah, on Coanga and Selby, I believe.
That's right. But they lined it with garbage bags, and Liz, the wonderful costume designer, put a little banaka or something on my
I
lip.
remember in this, I said to Eugene, I said, I love the little palsy you have there with your hands. And he said, yeah, I wish I could say that it was an affectation.
It's
so
also funny because Eugene is so funny, and then we make him the lame one.
Right. Which he's so funny at.
Yo, back off. The guy's funny.
That joke never quite worked.
Yeah,
and-
that was our satire on every time that you see crickets chirping when something's supposed to be silent.
that old standby.
We stole that from Buster Keaton.
This
We
must have been
added that
fun to
ourselves.
shoot.
Brad's great props, giant foam light.
This is great.
Had to train the dog to chew on Rochester.
This dog didn't really go for it, though. I recall
Yeah.
it being hard to get him to
It was
do
really
this.
tough to get the dog to do this.
You'd think it'd be the opposite, right? You'd think you'd have to beat him off the thing.
I'm sorry.
This scene was much longer.
Can we
It
be
had to be
friends?
cut for time,
Okay.
but I love this bit.
How about friends with benefits?
If you listen carefully, you can hear James doing the tongue thing. Can you do that, James?
We shot this during the day on the set, and then the stuff outside we shot like at 1 a.m. after
About 3 weeks later.
3 weeks later,
Yeah.
after Curtis Hanson finished shooting
Right.
the Piddler and the Roof scenes in the same parking lot.
That's right.
Well, this was a lucky break. His eyes
His
just
eyes
came
fell
off.
There's an outtake on the DVD of him being spun around and throwing up, I think.
And look how wet he is from kissing Susan.
Yeah, that's all spit.
And again, Seth deserves his respect because then he had to play the rest of the day with that shit on him.
Big shit on him.
And it was a long day from that point.
Mock 'em.
I mean, it had to be like yay long.
I think that did further his career quite a bit.
How crazy this show is.
That, at the end of the day, with all like little creative things that bumped me one way or another that were bittersweet, that's what I always rely on, was how fun this was to make and how absurd it was, and that everybody put so much money and enthusiasm and time into it, and it's certainly a unique show.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands or paws or whatever together for Yerrid Montague.
I remember the first one I directed. Dan and I were standing on the set as things were happening, and I looked at him. I said, "Can you believe they're giving you all this money to make this show? And they're not even
know.
checking on us."
I know. And it turned out, I think part of the reason this became difficult is that it was so largely produced in a year where a lot of the networks lost money over the 9/11 situation, and also shows like American Idol really coming out and making a lot of money for the studio, and it made big shows like this very difficult to
This is an
sell.
interesting moment. Warren's eulogy. It's cool because Warren is such a unlikable character to really have a heartfelt moment here. And Steve Levitan wrote this whole speech.
That's right.
I took like 3 cracks at it, and I guess because I'm basically a heartless bastard, couldn't put any emotion into this thing. And Steve basically had to take it and write it himself. And I think between the writing and Dan's performance and some of these great reaction shots, it becomes a real believable moment coming from a ridiculous sock puppet. And that's what this show is at its best is about, is really making these characters three-dimensional, making Warren an asshole and capable of this.
Right.
He's a lot like Dan.
A capable asshole. To Rochester.
There's Seth all gooped up again.
Indeed. It's a good take. Yeah.
And Bob is my next-door neighbor.
That's right.
By coincidence. It's the oddest thing. I knew the warden from Shawshank lived in my neighborhood, and then we started working together. He lived next door to me.
Did you carpool?
No, I had writer's hours. He had actor's hours.
Ah, yeah. And here we go. The pyrotechnics, folks.
You're going to burn a puppet. I remember.
Look at that acting.
I knew I wasn't coming back.
That actually looked pretty good. It was like basically a barbecue.
Yeah. I remember I said to Bill, he said, well, we're going to roast Rochester this episode. I mean, you mean like a wake? He said, no, we're going to roast him.
Love the coffin, too. That was a great coffin. I had a Polaroid of that coffin on my refrigerator. James. Any final thoughts, my friend? Mr. Murray?
It was fun being in the hole, no matter where it was.
How about you guys, Bill?
Do it again in a minute.
The script supervisor whose name just went by, Carol McKechnie, used to be my boss when I was a runner.
That's your final thought?
That's my final thought.
Brent, you're fucked.